Number 9. Ali ABULABAN. Ali ABULABAN was a TikTok star and had been accused of spying on his divorced wife before brutally murdering her and a friend he thought she was cheating on him with. ABULABAN, who had almost 1 million followers on the social media platform TikTok, had been living in a hotel and following his wife since she asked him to leave their San Diego apartment on October 18th. 2 days later, when his life was gone, ABULABAN snuck back into the apartment and installed an app with a listening device on his 5-year-old's iPad, which had been left sitting in a bedroom. Before sneaking back out, he also wrecked the place. ABULABAN began listening to the app and heard his wife talking with another man just a few hours later. Angry, he returned to the apartment and opened fire on Barron, striking him 3 times while also shooting his wife in the head. He then confessed to the crime to his mother before picking up his daughter from school, all while carrying the murder weapon. ABULABAN called the police while driving and confessed to the shooting. He was apprehended soon afterwards. He has since been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder according to jail records and is being held without bail. His next court hearing is scheduled for a later date and will determine what his final sentence will be. This was also not the first time ABULABAN had acted violently against his wife. A month before the event, she filed a police report against her husband after he had shoved and hurt her. Seems like ABULABAN has a violent history and future behind bars. Number 8. Nancy CRAMPTON-BROPHY. In an ironic twist of fate, a romance novelist in Portland, Oregon, who wrote an essay called How to Murder Your Husband, is on trial for essentially doing just that. In June 2018, a coworker discovered Brophy's husband's body in a kitchen at the Oregon Culinary Institute where he taught lessons. He had been shot in the chest and back while getting ready for class that morning. CRAMPTON-BROPHY told police she was at home during the time of the murder, and she was arrested in September of 2018 after it was discovered she was actually in the neighborhood of the crime scene when it happened. Police have not yet made any other suspects in the case public. Prosecutors claim that CRAMPTON-BROPHY shot her husband of 27-year-old, Chef Daniel Brophy, for a life insurance payout, which she claimed was only worth $40,000. But investigators later learned that the insurance payment was actually worth a whopping $1.4 million. Also, traffic cameras caught Crampton's minivan pulling up near the Oregon Culinary Institute and driving away shortly after the fatal shots were fired. CRAMPTON-BROPHY, a once prolific novelist, penned books about relationships that were wrong yet never felt so right, with bare-chested guys all over the covers. She wrote about a woman who fantasized about murdering her husband every day of her marriage in The Wrong Cop. In The Wrong Husband, the lady attempts to escape an abusive husband by pretending to die. And then there was, of course, the excerpt on how to get away with murdering your husband in an essay titled, How to Murder Your Husband. The crime solves itself here, if you ask us. In November 2011, she published the now famous blog post where she described the 5 primary motives and a variety of murder weapons she would choose if her character in a romance novel were to murder their husband. In the trial, though, the court judge declared that the essay would be excluded from evidence since the modest probative value of the article written so long ago is overshadowed by the risk of unfair bias and confusion of the problems it caused. CRAMPTON-BROPHY's defense had argued against the greed motive and pursued a narrative of love that CRAMPTON-BROPHY had for her husband, but the evidence is stacked against her, and that's without counting the ironic piece of writing which turned out to be an instruction manual. Number 7. Orlando TERCERO. In the early morning hours of March 8, 2018, Binghamton University student Haley Anderson went to Orlando TERCERO's residence after a night of partying with their friends. Surveillance cameras caught the two together, and this video was the last time Anderson was ever seen alive. TERCERO was seen leaving his flat by himself just a few hours later. When Anderson didn't come home the next day, her roommates tracked her phone to TERCERO's house and broke in through the side window. They found her dead body in his bed. Anderson's murder was deemed a homicide by strangulation after an autopsy at Lourdes Hospital in Binghamton. Authorities began looking for TERCERO, who became their primary suspect. It turns out TERCERO escaped to Nicaragua after murdering Anderson. He was taken in by Nicaraguan authorities at a nearby hospital, where he'd been sent after attempting to take his own life shortly after coming to the country. TERCERO was eventually charged with femicide in Nicaragua and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. In Broome County, New York, he was also charged with second-degree murder. Details of TERCERO's previous relationship with the victim were revealed in the aftermath of the crime. According to some stories, the man became obsessed with her after he dated for a short period of time. He wanted to continue the romantic engagement, but Anderson said she preferred to keep their relationship strictly platonic. In a moment of anger and jealousy, he murdered her after learning his expectations for a loving future with her would never come true. Number 6. James Fairweather. On March 29, 2014, James Atfield, a father of 5 from Essex, England, was found bleeding in the grass at Castle Park in Colchester after being stabbed repeatedly. Paramedics arrived on the scene, but their last-ditch efforts to save the 33-year-old were useless. Local police were taken back by the brutality of Atfield's murder, as he'd been stabbed more than 100 times by some unknown attacker. Even though the victim had consumed a large amount of alcohol that day, the defensive wounds on his arms and hands suggested that he was conscious during the assault and tried to ward off his assailant. A few months later, a 31-year-old University of Essex student was discovered dead in the overgrown grass outside her house. Nahid Al-Manea, the victim, was stabbed in the abdomen and eyes before being left for dead on June 17, 2014. Authorities interrogated many citizens in the area who had committed knife-related crimes in their history. One of the people they interviewed was a man named James Fairweather, and he had been convicted of knife-point robbery in January of 2014. Fairweather was able to give an alibi, which initially removed him as a suspect in the deaths of Atfield and Al-Manea. But in May of the following year, a concerned dog walker saw the man loitering early in the morning with rubber gloves and a knife. Fairweather was arrested, and during later consultations with a psychiatrist, he told them about hearing voices in his head urging him to commit terrible acts of violence. A psychiatrist later testified that James had some of the most antisocial and violent thoughts they'd ever heard from a patient. Investigators discovered videos on serial killers like the Yorkshire Ripper in Fairweather's possession, and it was revealed that he had an obsession with mass murderers before becoming one himself. He was found unanimously guilty of murdering both Atfield and Al-Manea in April of 2016. As a result, he was condemned to a life in jail with a chance of parole after 27 years. Number 5. Terry Kelly. On October 6, 2021, a little kid named Cleo Smith vanished from the Blowholes campsite in Western Australia's Gascoyne region. During an interview with the child's mom, she said Cleo had got up around 1:30 a.m. the night before to ask for water before falling back asleep. Smith had disappeared without a trace, along with her sleeping bag, and when her parents woke up the next morning, they instantly alerted authorities, who coordinated a massive air, land, and sea search the same day. The Western Australian Police Force declared on October 21st that they were looking at the case as a kidnapping, and they offered $700,000 in reward for information leading to Smith's recovery. The child was missing for 18 days before being found, quote, alive and well inside a closed house minutes away from her family's home in Carnarvon. Investigators described that they used forensic leads to secure a search warrant for the house. Terry Kelly, the suspected abductor, had a doll fixation and a room full of toys in his house, despite the fact that he had no children of his own, according to his neighbors. When officers rescued Smith from Kelly's house, the child was found playing with some of Kelly's toys, according to police. The man was accused of various crimes, including forcibly taking a child under the age of 16, and is scheduled to appear in court in early November 2021. In January 2022, he pleaded guilty to kidnapping and faces a maximum sentence of 20 years in jail. His motivations were unknown, although others suspected his fascination caused him to seek out a living doll to add to his collection. What do you think of Kelly's hobby? Let us know in the comments down below, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to see more cool videos. Number 4. Jessie J's Stalker. In June 2011, English pop singer Jessica Ellen Cornish, better known by her stage name Jessie J and the hit song Price Tag, got a broken foot after jumping off stage during a rehearsal for London's Summertime Ball. Cornish continued to walk on her injured foot for 2 weeks, oblivious to the seriousness of her injury, which aggravated the break. She was eventually told to wear a walking boot for months, but it was later revealed she would suffer from arthritis for the rest of her life and would be unable to wear high-heeled shoes anymore unless she wanted to experience agonizing pain. Following the incident, 24-year-old Cornish began receiving bizarre and scary texts from a young fan who had gotten hold of the singer's private contact information. Cornish received a text message with an image of the teen's fractured leg. The adolescent supposedly self-inflicted the fracture in an attempt to resemble the star after developing an obsessive fascination with her. Cornish reportedly increased her personal security measures after getting scared by the fan's actions and concerned for her physical safety. Now that's a case of twisted devotion. Number 3. Rohit Sharma. Rohit Sharma became obsessed with a female waiter after meeting her briefly back in November 2017 at a business in Wembley, northwest London. According to the police report on the incident, 28-year-old Sharma returned to the store later that day with his father. He actually proposed marriage to the anonymous woman, who was in her 20s, despite the fact that he had literally just met her. Sharma was rejected by the woman, and she went as far as quitting her job after he pursued her for multiple days. Sharma tracked down her new workplace and began spamming her with texts, phone calls, and social media messages on a daily basis. She officially reported her stalker to the police in February 2018, and he was handed a harassment warning. It was useless though, since Sharma continued his relentless stalking until he was charged in July of that year. He became a fugitive after failing to appear for a planned court hearing in November, and he remained on the run until April the following year when he was finally arrested. Sharma eventually pleaded guilty to the stalking, harassment, and failing to appear in court, and as a result, he was sentenced to 29 months in prison, following which he was to be considered for deportation back to his home country of India. For all the fear he put that girl through, it'd only be right. Number 2, John DUBIS. In August 2013, staff at Jennifer Lopez's pool home found a 49-year-old man who had been stalking the singer secretly living on her multi-million-dollar Hamptons property for about 6 days. Later reports identified the man as John DUBIS, a retired firefighter who, using the alias David A. Lopez, often posted messages on social media about his obsessive, manic crush on the famous celebrity. Thankfully, J-Lo was out of town during his lengthy home invasion. Neighbors initially assumed Dubis's vehicle, which was parked in front of the house, belonged to a friend of Lopez's. He also went virtually unnoticed by the grounds crew, spending his evenings on a random couch in the pool shed. Investigators think he posted many photographs to his social media accounts that were taken at various places on the mansion's grounds. Dubis bragged about allegedly marrying J-Lo and fathering his children in the captions of his disturbing posts. Local police ultimately apprehended him on the property and arrested him, charging him with stalking, burglary, criminal contempt, and possession of burglary tools. It was later revealed Lopez had obtained a restraining order against Dubis before he even broke into her home. Number 1, Augustine Lucas Mariani. At about 6:30 p.m. on November 29, 2021, police in Miami Beach, Florida were called to a neighborhood apartment after receiving reports of a stabbing. When the cops arrived, they found 20-year-old Augustine Lucas Mariani lying on top of a young woman, later identified as 29-year-old Delphina Pan. Both had significant stab wounds, and paramedics on the scene performed life-saving measures before taking them to Jackson Memorial Hospital. Pan was pronounced dead a short time later, while Mariani survived what was believed to be a self-inflicted knife wound. Following an investigation into the event, officers discovered Mariani and Pan had worked together at the Kansas Bar and Grill restaurant in South Beach. Mariani, a bartender, had asked Pan out multiple times, according to testimony from some of the pair's co-workers. Despite the woman's subtle denials to each request, Mariani continued to harass her for months as his obsession with her grew to a dangerous point. Pan left work early on the evening of her death for unclear reasons. According to the restaurant's manager, Mariani mysteriously left the restaurant a short time later as well. An eyewitness claimed to have spotted the young man at Pan's apartment, where he waited for her arrival before stabbing her with the knife. Mariani killed the victim before turning the knife on himself, and he was booked into the county jail after being released from the hospital and charged with second-degree murder. Thanks for watching. Would you rather worry about a creepy stalker spying on you for the rest of your life, or being alone forever? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.